Most people believe that by the time you reach a certain age, life finally makes sense, that the hard questions have answers now, that peace arrives as a reward for surviving long enough. But that isn't quite how it works. What often comes instead is something quieter and more unsettling. A slow realization that many of the things you spent decades chasing were never meant to last, or worse. They were never really yours to begin with. When you're young, you're told that time will fix things, that wounds soften, dreams settle, people stay. Yet somewhere after 65, a different truth begins to surface. Not loudly, not all at once, but in small moments. A familiar chair left empty. A name you once dialed without thinking, now gone from your phone. A mirror that no longer agrees with how you feel inside. And then, almost unexpectedly, comes the thought, so that's how it really is. Not bitter, not tragic, just clear. Life was never about securing everything forever. It was about learning what can be held gently and what must be allowed to pass through your hands without a fight. That realization doesn't come from books or advice. It comes from living long enough to see illusions fall away on their own. For most of life, happiness is misunderstood as something to be achieved, a finish line, a collection of moments stacked high enough to finally feel safe inside yourself. We're taught this early, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly. Hold on, try harder, don't let go yet. As if life were a test of endurance and the prize went to those who clenched their fists the longest. But aging has a way of quietly correcting that idea. What many people don't realize, until much later, is that suffering often doesn't come from loss itself. It comes from resistance, from gripping identities, expectations, old roles, and unfinished stories long after they've stopped breathing. Letting go is often mistaken for giving up, but in truth, it's closer to understanding. It's recognizing when holding on costs more than it gives, when the weight you carry is no longer proof of love, loyalty, or strength, but simply habit. This shift doesn't arrive as a grand revelation. It comes softly, in pauses, in moments where you stop asking life to be different and start allowing it to be exactly what it is. And from there, something opens. A series of realizations that only time, tenderness, and lived experience can reveal. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes from carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits. It doesn't shout. It just lingers, like an old coat worn out of habit, even when it no longer keeps you warm. For years, you may have been the strong one, or the dependable one, the provider, the fixer, the one who didn't have the luxury of falling apart. These roles once had meaning. They may have even saved you at one point. But time changes the body before it changes the heart, and eventually you notice the strain. You pause longer before standing up. You think twice before offering help. And a small, honest voice inside asks, "Who am I if I stop performing this role?" Many people over 65 know this moment well. When retirement arrives, or when illness, loss, or simple fatigue redraws the boundaries, you're left alone with yourself. Not the title, not the function, just the person underneath. And surprisingly, there is relief there. Not emptiness, relief. Because inner peace doesn't come from proving your worth anymore. It comes from allowing yourself to be unfinished, unimpressive, human. When you let go of who you thought you had to be, you make room for who you already are, quietly enough. Hjärtstörst. There comes a time when explaining yourself begins to feel heavier than being misunderstood. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've said it so many times already. Earlier in life, being understood feels essential. You want your reasons to be clear, your intentions recognized, your pain acknowledged in the right language. So you explain, you clarify. You replay old conversations in your mind, imagining how it might finally land if you say it just right. But years pass, and something changes. You start to notice that understanding cannot be forced, that even people who love you may only ever know parts of you, and that chasing their full comprehension often costs you more peace than it's worth. This realization often arrives quietly, maybe during a family gathering where you decide not to correct the story this time, or when someone makes an assumption about you and you feel no urge to fix it. That's not indifference, it's freedom. Because when you stop needing to be understood, you begin to understand yourself more deeply. You trust your inner truth without requiring witnesses. And in that silence, something soft settles in, a calm that doesn't need agreement to exist. Some griefs don't knock anymore. They already live inside the house. They sit quietly in familiar corners, attached to faces, names, and moments that time never fully erased. Losses that were never given space to breathe. Words that stayed unsaid because life moved on before you were ready. For a long time, these griefs feel like proof of love, as if releasing them would mean forgetting, as if pain were the last thread connecting you to what mattered. But aging brings a subtle question. How long must sorrow stay awake to honor the past? You might notice it when a memory surfaces without the sharp edge it once had, or when you speak a name aloud and feel tenderness instead of ache, not numbness, something gentler. There is a moment, often unannounced, when you realize the grief has already softened, that it no longer needs your constant attention to remain real. Letting go here doesn't mean erasing history. It means allowing memory to rest, allowing your heart to make room for quiet mornings that are not haunted by yesterday. Peace arrives when grief is no longer carried like a duty, but held like a photograph, cherished, then gently set down. For much of life, time feels like something you're negotiating with. If you work hard enough, wait patiently enough, endure long enough, surely it will pay you back. This belief is subtle. It hides in thoughts like, one day I'll finally rest, or, after this phase, things will slow down. As if life were a long corridor leading to a room where everything finally settles. But later years tell a different story. You begin to sense that time is not a ledger. It does not remember what you sacrificed. It does not return favors. It simply moves, quietly, impartially, through joy and loss alike. This realization can feel unsettling at first, even unfair. You may look back and think of all the moments postponed, all the happiness delayed for a future that arrived, incomplete. And then something unexpected happens. When you stop believing time owes you, you stop waiting for permission to be present. You drink your tea slowly. You sit without checking the clock. You stop rushing through conversations as if something better is scheduled later. Inner peace comes when you understand this. Nothing is being saved for later. This moment is not a draft. It is the only version that exists. Do you confirm okay for me to write the next section? I'm ready to continue whenever you are. At some point, the noise thins out. The phone rings less. The calendar opens up in ways it never used to. And what once felt like freedom can quietly turn into a question. Am I being left behind or simply left with myself? For much of life, togetherness is survival. Family, work, friendships, constant motion, constant connection. Being alone is often treated as something to fix, to fill, to escape. But later in life, solitude arrives whether you invite it or not. A partner passes, friends move away or inward. The world grows faster while you grow more deliberate. At first, loneliness can feel sharp, like an echo in rooms that once held laughter. Yet over time, something else becomes possible. You begin to notice the difference between being alone and being abandoned. You discover mornings that belong entirely to you, thoughts that no longer compete for space, a quiet companionship with your own presence. Letting go of the fear of being alone doesn't mean you stop valuing people. It means you stop outsourcing your sense of wholeness. And in that space, gentle, unoccupied, you may find a calm you didn't know you were allowed to have. When you look back now, life may seem less like a long list of achievements and more like a gradual unclenching, a slow release of things that once felt essential, urgent, defining. Not because they were wrong, but because they were temporary. What remains after all this letting go is surprisingly light, fewer arguments with reality, less need to explain, to prove, to wait, to be surrounded at all times. Life simplifies when you stop carrying what time has already asked you to lay down. Peace doesn't arrive with new answers or grand realizations. It arrives in ordinary moments, when nothing is missing, even though much has passed. You begin to see that awareness itself is enough, that freedom is not found in adding meaning, but in removing the noise that kept you from hearing your own breath. There is a quiet dignity in this stage of life, a steadiness that doesn't demand attention, A calm that knows joy and sorrow can share the same room without fighting. And in this stillness, something becomes clear. You were never meant to hold everything forever, only long enough to learn what truly mattered. When the days grow quieter, they also grow more honest. There is less to distract you from yourself, and less need to. You may find yourself wondering which parts of your life were chosen, and which were simply carried, out of habit or expectation, which memories still ask for your attention, and which are ready to rest. Perhaps the question is no longer, what more can I do? But what can I finally release without fear? What would it feel like to stop measuring your life by what is gone, and start sensing it by what remains? Your breath, your awareness, the simple fact of being here. If you no longer had to prove anything to time, to others, or even to your younger self, what kind of gentleness might enter your days? There is no final answer waiting at the end of these questions, only an open space, a pause wide enough to hold your own reflections, your own truths. And maybe that is enough, not closure, but permission, to sit with your life as it is now and listen to what it has been quietly telling you all along.